Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mom. Thank you for joining us here this morning. I am Juan Impera, one of the presenter of the last assigned lesson, which is the lesson 3. And now I am here together with my groups to discuss with you about genetically modified organisms, science, health, and politics. So without further ado, let's start now our presentation. So lesson 3, genetically modified organisms, science, health, and politics, presented by group 3. Next slide, we have here the names of the 10 members arranged according to the order of appearance. So yours truly, Pera Juan, followed by Miss Marindo Kirinilin, followed by Miss Rillian Rodaella, and followed by Miss Colarat Mary Jane. Next slide, we have here the objectives of this lesson. So at the end of this lesson, the student should be able to identify issues on genetically modified organisms, discuss different implications and impact of GMOs, and create a research paper on the impact of GMOs in the Philippine context. Next slide, we have here the introduction. So in 2001, Rosalie Eliasus, a former overseas Filipino worker in Singapore, turned farmer, attended the Integrated Peace Management Farmers Field School and was introduced to BT corn, a genetically modified corn that is resistant to the destructive Asian corn borer. Ms. Eliasus volunteered for demo testing in her field. BT corn yielded 7.2 tons per acre as compared to a regular yield of 4.2 tons per hectare. No insecticide spraying was needed. So BT corn is enhanced biotechnology to protect against insect pests. It is built-in insect protection, comes from naturally occurring microorganisms called Bacillus thuringiensis or BT. Then the Asian corn borer is, in other words, it is a corn worm. So genetic matter engineering has been with the human society since selected breeding was introduced to humankind, and when animals were domesticated, yet the process of genetic alterations is all about natural. Next slide, we have here Mr. Jack Williamson. So it was in 1951 that the term genetic engineering was coined by Jack Williamson, author of the science fiction novel Dragon's Island. This was years before actual research findings on the DNA's role in heredity and its structure. The double helix of Watson and Crick were published. Through continuous research for development, genetic engineering no longer stayed in science fiction novel. It became the reality in science laboratories. The genetic process of genetic engineering is the deliberate manipulation of the organism's genes, where it may involve transfer of genes from other organisms. An anti-resistant E. coli bacteria or antibiotic-resistant E. coli bacteria was created in 1973. To date, there are ongoing researches on GMOs such as using genetically modified male mosquitoes as pest control over female mosquito carriers for Zika virus. However, despite the many possibilities of creating solutions for problems and opening doors for innovation, genetic engineering faces much oppositions. Opponents raise ethical, social, and environmental issues related to genetic engineering and its GMOs. Next slide, we have here the genetically modified organism or GMO. So genetically modified organism or GMO is the term used for an organism created through genetic engineering. The World Health Organization or WHO defines GMO as an organism, either plant, animal, or microorganism in which the genetic material or DNA has been altered in a way that does not occur naturally by mating or natural recombination. So beside the description of the GMO is the diagram of how bacterial gene is introduced through genetic engineering to plant cells and tissues to develop the breed a genetically modified plant. So moving on, we have here the GMOs in food and agricultural industries. So the Center of Ego, Genetics and Environmental Health, or CEEH 2013, identified the following rules of GMOs in the food and agricultural industries. So first, we have here the genetically modified plants to resist certain pests. An example is BT corn. The DNA or genome of the BT corn has been modified with the gene of Bacillus thuringiensis, a soil bacterium that produces proteins which is toxic to corn borers or worm. The second one, we have here the virus resistance, genetically modified plants to resist certain viruses. An example is the genetically modified papaya or rainbow papaya. The papaya ring spot virus is known to be detrimental to papaya plants. The protein of the PRSV was introduced to the papaya plant through plant tissue, which turned to be the resistance of the virus itself. The effect was like the vaccines humans have against measles and influenza virus. The third one is the herbicide tolerance. Genetically modified plants to tolerate herbicide. An example is the Roundup Ready soybean, glyphosate, an herbicide for weeds, was introduced to soybeans, making it tolerant to the herbicide itself. Farmers can spray the herbicide, killing the weeds but not the soybeans. The fourth one, we have fortification. Genetically modified plants fortified with certain minerals. An example is golden rice. Beta-carotene, a precursor of vitamin A, was introduced through biosynthesis chains to the rice and making the rice grains fortified with vitamin A. However, this golden rice has an issue in the Philippines due to being a product of the GMO. Then the fifth one, we have here the cosmetic preservation. Genetically modified plants resist natural discoloration. An apple is Arctic apple. An example is an Arctic apple. The apple variety was genetically modified to suppress the burrowing of apple due to the superficial damage. Then the last one, we have here the increased growth rate. A genetically modified organism that has higher yielded in growth than normal species. An example is Agua Advantage salmon, a gene from an ocean pod. An eel-like fish was introduced to Pacific Chinook salmon, making the salmon grow faster than its normal rate. Next slide, we have here the GMOs in non-food crops and microorganisms. So genetically modified organisms or GMOs in non-food crops and some microorganisms involve the following. First one, we have here the GMOs in flower production. GMOs in flower production are seen in modified color and extended base life of flowers. Examples are blue roses. The so-called blue roses, which are in reality is lilac or purple, contain cyanidin 3 to 5 digloxide together with a large amount of flavonols. The introduce of the flavonoid 3151 and hydrolase gene into pelargonidin or cyanidin, producing rose cultivars diverts the anthocyanin biosynthetic pathway toward the production of delphinidin glossides and the flower color blue. The second one, we have here the paper production. Modified characteristics of trees of higher yield of paper production. Examples, we have here the poplar trees. Lignin is complex polymer in trees that is removed from wood to make paper through crop process. Through inserting genes that code of ferulic acid in young poplar trees, the lignin structure is modified, making lignin easier to break down. The third one, we have here pharmaceutical products. Modified plants to produce pharmaceutical products. An example is the periwinkle plants. Bacterial genes were added to the periwinkle plant to enhance the production of vinblastine, an alkaloid usually added to drugs for cancer treatments like Hodgkin's lymphoma. Then the fourth one, we have here bioremediation. Use of modified plants that can assist in the bioremediation of pollute sites. An example is shrub tobacco, Nicotiana glauca, or shrub tobacco, genetically modified with phytochelatin, is used for the bioremediation. It shows high-level accumulation of zinc, lead, calcium, nickel, and boron, and produces high biomass. The fifth one, we have here enzyme and drug production. Use modified microorganisms that produce enzymes for food processing and medicine. So, an example is the CGTs, or cyclomaltodextrin glycosyltransferase. An enzyme used for food flavor enhancer is produced in higher quantity by bacterium Bacillus, which was genetically modified with the gene of thermophilic anaerobie. Then the last one, we have here the GMOs in the medical field. Genetic engineering is played a significant role from diagnosis to treatment of human dreaded diseases. It helps in the production of drugs, gene therapy, and laboratory researchers. One classic example is Hamlin, the genetically engineered insulin used by type 1 diabetes patients who are insulin dependent. In the past, insulin is extracted from the pancreas of pigs and cows and have caused allergic reaction to some diabetes using it. So that would be all for my part. Miss Marinduque, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So before I proceed to my topic about genetically modified organisms, science, health, and politics, thank you for that, Mr. Pera. By the way, I am Renilyn Marinduque, a BS Criminology second year student. So my topic is all about the benefits of GMOs. So the first benefit of GMO is improvement of desirable characteristics. The GMO offer longer shelf life, enhanced color and taste, enhanced production or reduction of enzymes and other modified characteristics of plants, animals, and microorganisms. The second is nutritional and pharmaceutical enhancement. The crops like maize fortified with lysine and golden rice fortified with vitamin A and iron. There are now edible vaccines for viral and diarrheal diseases. It also reduced the use of fertilizer and pesticides. Over 400 million acres of GMO farmlands all over the world. So here are the top 5 countries that operate GMO farmlands: the United States, Brazil, Argentina, India, and Canada. There are also some agricultural crops that have been approved for public consumption and are already in the market. Includes alfalfa, corn, papaya, soybean, sugar beets, and squash. Most of these GMO crops were made to be resistant to pests. Examples of the common food with GMOs are Kellogg's Corn Flakes, Quaker Chewy Granola Bars, Ultra Slim Fast, Quaker Yellow Corn Meal, Alpo Dry Pet Food. In the animal industries, there are ongoing researches like studies on Pacific salmon that grows twice faster than the native salmon and chicken resistant to H5N1 bird flu viruses. However, these GMO animals are all in research laboratory and not yet approved for public consumption. So the next topic is the potential risk of GMOs. So there are a lot of major concerns regarding the potential risk One of these are the inadequate studies of the effects of GMOs to humans and the environment. So not just GMOs brought good effects, but there are also negative ones. So the second is the genetic engineering promotes mutation in organisms, which the long-term effect is still unknown. Human consumption of GMO might have been the following effects. First is more allergic reactions. So there are foods that may trigger allergic reactions, such like the seafoods. A lot of people have allergic reactions when eating seafoods, especially in seafoods. Number two is gene mutation. GMO food may develop abnormalities and mutation. The third, antibiotic resistance. GMO food contains antibiotic-resistant genes, may cause disease-causing bacteria, likely to be more antibiotic-resistant too, increasing the possibility of widespread of the disease. And the third, national value. GMO food may have changed in their nutritional value. So the next topic is the potential environmental risk caused by GMOs. So Karki 2006 summarized the perceived potential environmental risk caused by GMOs. The identified major risks are the following. So risk in gene flow. There is a potential risk of the modified gene to be transferred from the GMO crop to its wild relative or organism in the soil and human intestine. Number two, emergence of new forms of resistance and secondary pests and weed problems. The GMO crops resistant to certain pesticides may trigger new form of pest resistant, while GMO herbicide tolerant crops may lead to the overuse of the herbicides, which may trigger new form of weed resistance. Number three, recombination of virus and bacteria to produce new pathogens. The modified gene can be transferred and integrated in the viral or bacterial genes, which may lead to viral or bacterial gene modification or mutation. There are also other direct and indirect environmental risk caused by GMOs. The first direct environmental risk is the introduction of the GMOs in the natural environment may cause disruption of the natural communities through competition or interference. The second, the possibly of unexpected behavior of the GMOs in the environment if it escapes, if it stands to use and may pose threats or become pests. May cause harmful effects to ecosystem processes if GMOs interfere with the natural biochemical cycles, and the presence of GMO genes after its harvest, which may cause negative impacts of the consumer of GMO products. Second, indirect environmental risk. First, alteration of agricultural practices like managing negative impacts of GMO to the environment, such as evolution of insects, pests, and weeds that become resistant of GMO crops. May have impacts to biodiversity caused by the alteration in agricultural practices, and may have varied environmental impacts due to GMO's interaction and release in the natural environment. So that would be all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Renaline Marinduque. As time goes by, the world is becoming more advanced and we lived in a more technologically based environment, especially being more aware of science. One of the proofs that we observed is the creation of GMO, or the genetically modified organism made through genetic engineering, as what mentioned earlier. Good morning, everyone. My name is Roda Ala Urelian, taking the course Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in Social Studies, And in behalf of Miss Mary Jade Colarat, I will talk to you the potential human health risks caused by genetically modified organism. Potential human health risks caused by GMOs. According to Actor 2001, a major concern in the use and consumption of GMOs is its effect on human beings, primarily on human health. Some potential human health risks are identified, such as: first is the consumption of GMOs may have adverse effects since it is not naturally or organically produced. Second, consumption of GMOs may alter the balance of existing microorganisms in the human digestive system, so it may harm our digestive system if taken inside our body. Next would be the production of toxins may be detrimental to human health. And last is production of allergens may have adverse effects to humans, or it can cause allergic reactions. Other potential risks that raise major concern are: first is the Human Genome Project, or HGP. It is a mapping of human genes to provide framework for research and studies in the field of medicine. It was feared that the ability to produce human genetic information would create biases and give much power to people holding the information, and to the disadvantage of those who do not have the genetic information. Second is the mutation of genetically engineered microorganisms. Genetically modified bacteria and viruses may mutate to become more resistant or virulent that may cause more dreadful diseases for human beings. And the third is the cloning. So cloning is the asexual reproduction of an organism using parent cells through genetic engineering. So in February 24, 1997, the first mammal, Dolly, a sheep from Scotland, was born through cloning. When its celebrated success came the fear of human cloning. It emerged the ethical issue of man playing God. So moving on, we will talk about biosafety. So what is biosafety? Biosafety or biosecurity is defined as the discipline addressing the safe handling and containment of infectious microorganisms and hazardous biological materials. Safety with respect to the effects of biological research on humans and the environment. So this is according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary. So the international organizations develop principles and treaties that somehow ensure biosafety on GMOs. Some of these are the Codex Alimentarius Commission, or the Codex. So the Codex was created by the Food and Agricultural Organization together with the World Health Organization. So Codex is an intergovernmental body that develops the Codex Alimentarius, known as the International Food Code. So please take note of the International Food Code. So it is here. Next, so let me put it here. And so it is responsible for the development standards, codes of practices, guidelines, and recommendations on food safety. So the Codex has developed principles for human health risk analysis of genetically modified food products due to the pressing concerns on GMOs. In the year 2003, these principles include pre-market assessment of GM food products and its evaluation of direct and indirect effects. So the Codex Principles has no binding effect on national legislation, but through the sanitary and phytosanitary measures of the World Trade Organization. So let me take note of this. Let me underline it. No binding effects on national legislation, which means that only the sanitary and phytosanitary is its obligation. Next would be the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. So it was established on the year 2003. So it is an international environmental treaty that regulates the transboundary movements of living modified organisms, or the LMOs. So living modified organisms refers to a genetically modified organisms contain DNA that has been altered using genetic engineering. So the Cartagena Protocol requires exports to seek consent from the imports before its first shipments of LMOs, according to World Health Organization in the year 2014. So let's move on to the International Trade Agreement on labeling of genetic modified food and food products. So the agreement requires export of GM food and food products to label their products and give rights to importing parties to reject or accept the GM products. So the premise of this policy is that consumers have the right to know and the freedom to choose GM or non-GM products. So the consumers has the right to choose if they want genetic modified or non-genetic modified products. So the World Health Organization, or WHO, in the year 2014 claims that all genetic modified products that are available in the international market have passed the safety assessment by national authorities. So these safety assessments basically look at the environmental and health risk factors, and food safety usually follows the Codex Food Code. So as what I have mentioned earlier, the Codex. So let's move on to GMOs in the Philippine context. So the GMO concern started in the year 1990s with the creation of the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines through Executive Order Number 430 of 1990. The NCBP developed the guidelines on the planned release of the genetically manipulated organisms, or the GMOs, and potential harmful exotic species in the year 1998. So in 2002, the Department of Agriculture released into the environment of GM plants and plant products, and on that same year, the entry of GMO importation started. So it was in the year 2002. So the Philippines was marked to be the first country in Asia to approve commercial cultivation of GMOs when GM corn planting was approved in the year 2002. So from December 2002 to present, there are 70 GMO applications approved by the Department of Agriculture for the release to the environment, 62 GMOs of which are approved for food feed and processing, and the remaining 8 were approved for propagation. So in the year 2004, the Philippines was classified by International Service for Acquisition of Agribiotech applications as one of the 14 biotech mega countries, which grows 50,000 hectares or more of GMO crops annually. So it was too many hectares. So in that same year, Senator Juan Flavier authored a bill on the mandatory labeling of food and food products with GMOs. Unfortunately, the Senate did not pass the bill. So, look at your lower left, this is Senator Juan Flavier. So in the year 2006, the Philippines became part of the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety, and in that same year, Executive Order Number 514 was issued to address the biosafety requirements of the Cartagena Protocol and the establishment of the National Biosafety Framework, or NBF. So in the year 2010, the Organic Act was issued, encouraging organic agriculture than GMO-related agriculture. So prior to this act, several provinces like Negros Occidental and Negros Oriental which agreed to support organic agriculture. There was the establishment of Negros Organic Island through a Memorandum of Agreement or MOA between the two provinces in 2005. So with this MOA, the two provinces were able to ban the entry of GMOs and leaving GMOs in their provinces through provincial ordinance. So the Negros Organic Island Memorandum or MOA was the reason why the entry of GMOs and leaving GMOs were banned in the two provinces. So similar to this case, Davao City passed the Organic Agriculture Ordinance in the year 2010. This city ordinance helps the prevention of field testing of GMBT eggplant in the UP Mindanao campus. So please take a look at the picture above this man here. So these are on the left side is the organic, and on the right side is the genetic modified eggplant. So in the year 2012, Representative Teddy Casino together with other congressmen filed a bill pushing the mandatory labeling of GM food and food products. To date, there is no Philippine biosafety law, only biosafety regulations form under NBF. So there is no Philippine biosafety law, only the biosafety regulations as of the moment. So please look at the picture on the lower left. The man wearing blue polo shirt is Representative Teddy Casino. So in December 2015, the Supreme Court ordered to put an end to the field testing of GMO BT eggplant and declared Administrative Order Number 8, Series of 2002 of the Department of Agriculture as null and void. This means that any actions or procedures related to GMO importations and propagations is temporarily put stop until a new administrative order is issued in accordance with the law. So in March 7, 2016, 5 government agencies, namely the Department of Science and Technology, Department of Agriculture, Department of Environment and Natural Resources, Department of Health, and Department of the Interior and Local Government, passed a joint Department Circular Number 1 Series 2016 on rules and regulations for the research and development, handling and use, transboundary movement, release in the environment, and management of the genetically modified plant and plant products derived from the use of modern biotechnology. This joint department circular paves way to issuance of new permits for planting and importing GM crops in the country. So that would be all for my part. Thank you.
So thank you for that, Ms. Rillian Roda Ella. So next slide, we have here the issues that is related to our topic, which is the genetically modified organisms, environmental concerns. So we provided here 2 concerns or issues which is under our topic. So first, we have here increased use of toxic herbicides and pesticides. Second, we have here contamination, and the third bullet would be the link of the article. So the first one, increased in use of toxic herbicides. So the majority of the genetically modified crops are those which have been engineered to be herbicide or weed killer resistant. So an example for this is the Roundup Ready soya produced by Monsanto and grown extensively in North and South America, allows farmers to spray soya plants with Roundup, a toxic cocktail of glyphosate and other chemicals. This may not harm the genetically engineered crop, but the treatment creates chemical residues and Roundup, making it disastrous for surrounding ecosystem. The next one, we have here contamination. So for contamination, genetically modified crops can and do cross-pollinate with wild and non-genetically modified plants. Other sources of contamination are the inadvertent spread of seed by farm machinery, as well as mixing seeds during storage. So an example for this is cross-pollination will not only contaminate with wild plants, affecting their natural genetic makeup, but will seriously compromise any organic or non-genetically modified farm system. Despite the claims that genetically modified or the non-genetically modified can coexist. So next slide, we have here our solution. So for the first concern, our solution is minimizing and using herbicide and pesticide to avoid affecting other species or the non-target species. And on the other hand, the second concern, our solution is segregate properly the GMO seeds to avoid mixing the seeds to prevent from contamination, because the seeds of GMOs and the natural crops must be separated in order to prevent from contamination. So that would be all for our presentation. I hope that you learned for our discussion, and thank you.